A woman and her son are in the hospital lobby. The son appears to be upset and his mother consoles him and they both start to cry. A resident surgeon watches her from the glass door. What's wrong? Why are they crying? This video has all the answers. All you need to do is subscribe to this channel and like the video. Welcome back to Lion Recaps. Today, I'll explain episodes 13 and 14 of the series The Good Doctor, released in 2017. Sean is set to leave for work and knocks on Leah's door on his way out. At the dining hall, Sean has to eat alone. It appears someone is supposed to have breakfast with him. At the hospital, a patient is wheeled with his wife and her son walking behind. The child and mother are panicked, but she tries to calm her son. It appears that the patient has suffered a stroke. While on rounds with Dr. Andrews, Sean asks if Dr. Kalu and he were being punished. Dr. Andrews angrily walks away, and Dr. Kalu cautions Sean. The trio visit a patient, a girl with a burn on her arm. After Sean reads out the procedure for her treatment, she suddenly starts to have chest pains, but her vitals remain the same. Sean remarks that this could be an interesting case. In Dr. Lim's OR, Dr. Claire assists in surgery on a stroke patient who had an aneurysm. She learns that Dr. Coyle, who harassed her, got a new job and got a raise. The news shocks her. Sean becomes suspicious of Dr. Andrews' patient when he confirms that she didn't have a heart attack. However, the scans did show that her lungs were inflamed. He tells her a procedure will be carried out on her and gently pats her. The patient tells Dr. Kalu not to touch her unless medically necessary. Sean is still skeptical of the patient's story and doesn't believe anything she's telling him, but Dr. Kalu dismisses his worries. Dr. Claire goes to the director and asks why they didn't fire Dr. Coyle. The director tells her that their stories didn't match and Dr. Kalu's assault on him kept her hands tied. She says she cannot do beyond what she's already done because she has no evidence. This hurts her, and the director says she's open to any suggestions she may have concerning the case. Dr. Lim tells the stroke patient's family that he will be okay. Claire comes and tells her that they found another aneurysm as she leaves. The team do a bronchoscopy on the burn patient. Dr. Kalu notices Dr. Melendez's reaction to his presence and tells him he's not sorry for what he did and that he believes he has a lot to learn from him as a mentee. Dr. Melendez ignores him, and Sean asks if he's indifferent because of his breakup with Jessica. He ignores the question, and Sean assumes the experience is traumatic for him. The scope breaks through the bronchial wall, and they hurriedly prep for surgery because she's hemorrhaging. Sean keeps asking Dr. Melendez why he's too hard on Dr. Kalu, as he is not incapable of making mistakes. He asks what mistake he has made, and we learn that Dr. Melendez has punctured the patient's bronchial wall. Sean goes to see Dr. Glassman. He asks where he was since they always have breakfast on Mondays. Dr. Sean also asks Dr. Glassman if he should report Dr. Melendez for having punctured the patient's bronchial wall, as he's worried that he will treat him the way he's treating Dr. Kalu. He hesitates and then resolves to tell Sean to make the decision for himself and any other decisions he has to. This leaves him puzzled. Dr. Andrews and Dr. Lim discuss what to do about the stroke patient. He suggests that they ask Dr. Coyle to help with the surgery, but decide against it. Claire's against it, but Dr. Lim says they have to think of the patient. She still doesn't give in and insists that if Dr. Coyle is let off the hook because he's the best surgeon for the job, he will do worse. Dr. Lim has to decide who matters most between himself and the hospital staff. Later, Jessica Preston asks Dr. Melendez if he accidentally hurt a patient because of their breakup. He lies that he's fine and says he wasn't distracted and did not screw up. Sean asks the burn patient why she lied about inhaling smoke, and she says that she was just confused. She suddenly starts to throw up. Claire and Dr. Lim talk to Tessa about the paralyzed patient and how her husband needs surgery or else he will die. Dr. Lim mentions that there will be significant brain damage should the surgery be successful, but he will remain alive. Tessa decides not to consent to the surgery as her husband wouldn't want to live a compromised life. Claire and Sean have breakfast together, and he wonders why people lie without reason. He realizes she's not interested in the conversation and decides to eat alone. She apologizes and they discuss Claire's patient. He learns that Tessa doesn't want to consent to the surgery. She insists that Tessa loves her husband because she can read people, but Sean says reading people is biased and more concerned about actions. He says that you will do anything to prevent their death if you love someone. Dr. Melendez and Jessica talk about how he screwed up. He admits he's upset because Jessica believes Sean over him. She suggests someone else from legal should investigate him, and he agrees, but he refuses to admit that the puncture was his fault. Claire confronts Tessa. She asks if Tessa loves her husband enough to let him go or hates him enough to let him die. She opens up about her harassment from Dr. Coyle and asks what Tessa's husband did to her. Tessa wants to just let him die so that her son can have a good memory of his father. It turns out she is a victim of domestic violence. She insists that her husband dies. Sean hypothesizes that their patient could be a terrorist because she's a Muslim and because of the presence of ethanol in her body, and there are no other possible explanations for the discovery of ethanol in her system. Dr. Melendez doesn't agree that she's a terrorist because she's Muslim. Sean thinks she's lying and may be involved in the mass production of chemical weapons, but Dr. Melendez believes that the patient is probably afraid. He also warns Sean that unfounded speculations can destroy a person's life. Claire tries to convince Tessa by threatening to go to court. She's afraid for her life, but she signs the consent form when Claire regretfully insists. Claire suggests that she leave her husband instead. Sean confronts his patient about being a terrorist, but she ends up having a heart attack. Dr. Melendez talks to a lawyer about the accident with his patient. Claire and Dr. Lim perform the surgery on Tessa's husband, but she ends up having to terminate the procedure due to his BP skyrocketing. They need to figure out what they missed. Sean and Dr. Kalu have opposing views on how to treat the patient. Sean suggests steroids, but Dr. Kalu suggests antibiotics. Dr. Kalu believes a fourth party should be consulted. Dr. Melendez feels insulted, and Sean tells him he's arrogant. Dr. Melendez decides to put her on antibiotics. Meanwhile, Claire accuses Tessa of trying to kill her husband by filling his capsules with sugar, but when she seems innocent, they come to the conclusion that the son might have done it. Dr. Melendez's patient's vitals end up spiking, so Dr. Kalu switches from antibiotics to steroids. Sean says he should thank Dr. Kalu for saving her life, and he hesitantly thanks him. Sean knocks on Leah's old door and meets his new neighbor. Claire tells Tessa that the surgery went well, but she and her son are gone. Sean, Kalu, and Melendez learn that their patient was using ethanol to create perfume, and Sean learns that people lie to protect other people. In the hallway, Dr. Melendez and Jessica run into each other and talk about their relationship, and he opens up about being affected by the breakup, but that being a good surgeon doesn't make him a good husband. Claire meets up with Kirsten, another woman who worked with Dr. Coyle. Kirsten was also sexually harassed, and Claire wants them to work together. Sean talks to Dr. Glassman about having breakfast and needing a friend, but he says he can't be his friend. Sean begins to cry, so he leaves. He goes and buys a pine tree air freshener to remember Leah. It's a new day at St. Bonaventure Hospital for all of our residents, and Dr. Lim introduces a new resident to the team, Dr. Morgan Resnick. After introducing each other, Dr. Lim suggests to Dr. Melendez that they should pick their own residents and have a little wager over who gives the best patient care. He's hesitant, but he agrees. Sean and Dr. Kalu end up with Lim, while Claire and Morgan are with Dr. Melendez. Sean and Kalu have a young girl called Quinn brought to the hospital by her grandmother. Quinn is presented with possible appendicitis, but they discover that she's a boy who identifies themselves as a girl. Sean struggles to get his head around it. Claire and Morgan have a father who has been taking lots of unprescribed medications to fix himself. He's a teacher and a single father. Howard needs to be operated on, but the father does not want to leave his kids for too long. The resident discovers his appendix has unfortunately ruptured, requiring immediate surgery. During that surgery, Morgan clarifies to Claire that she's not here to make friends. She's here to be the best because Sean will definitely be selected at the end of the residency, since he's Dr. Glassman's mentee, and Dr. Kalu's assault on Dr. Coyle ultimately leaves him out of being selected. In the end, Morgan wants to stay. For Morgan, when Claire wins, she loses, and she will not let that happen. Claire says she's awfully cynical for someone so young. Dr. Andrews and his wife, Isabel, has sought out professional help from a fertility expert. He's worried that they've waited too long to try, and they're hoping for some good news from this specialist. Isabel is worried that he resents her for picking her career over wanting to have children. Dr. Andrews does blame her for their infertility, but he does not resent her. Test results return for Quinn, and she doesn't have appendicitis. She has testicular cancer. Dr. Kalu and Sean assure her that contracting it early means that treatment is possible, and she's unlikely to die. A condition for her bone density has also been detected. Their investigation reveals that she's been using puberty medications. Quinn was also diagnosed with low bone density. Quinn's grandmother, Ruth, discovers that neither her granddaughter nor her parents wanted her to find out about the medications because she believes Quinn is only going through a phase and does not support her granddaughter's transgender status. Treatment options are drawn up. When Quinn's parents arrive, they discuss her options, but Ruth is still not in support. Surgery will be required on the cancerous testicle, and medication will need to be stopped. This raises concerns with Quinn, who's worried she will go back to being a boy. Quinn doesn't want this to happen, but there are no other possible options. Sean then suggests removing both testicles. With both removed, it would prevent the buildup of testosterone to ultimately turn back into a boy. By this point, the grandmother is not happy at all. She has had enough and files a case of child abuse against the parents in an attempt to put a stop to everything. She's struggling to accept that she is indeed trans. Ruth threatens to contact child services if her daughter and son-in-law proceed with the bilateral procedure. The results for Andrews and his wife are back, and it's not good news. The experts say Dr. Andrews has a low sperm count. The specialist refers him to a urologist, and Isabel reminds him that they'll get through this together. Other options and treatment may need to be considered. Sean is at home watching TV, and Kenny walks in, freaking Sean out a little bit. Kenny sits down and asks Sean questions about his job and life. Kenny sits in the chair watching the TV too. Howard is out of surgery and needs to rest up, but he's not keen on staying. He desperately wants to get home to his kids. After his wife passed away, he has never left them alone. His symptoms get rapidly worse before they can even discuss options. They discover he has contracted a superbug. Howard's body has become resistant to all antibiotics due to the excessive amounts of medication he takes. Ultimately, he can no longer fight infection. Dr. Melendez informs him they will have to form a colostomy on him, and he would have to use a colostomy bag, most likely for life. Dr. Glassman holds a meditating session for the parents and Ruth to allow them to speak openly and hopefully come to a decision on her treatment. Quinn's parents forced her to present herself as a boy in public, but Quinn became so reclusive and hated herself so much that she almost committed suicide a year ago. Claire comes up with a plan B for Howard, a fecal transplant delivering healthy bacteria to the body. That way, he could avoid surgery altogether, but it is still experimental. She and Morgan manage to convince Melendez to try, and Morgan tells Claire that she will be the only doctor who can handle the feces when it arrives at the hospital. The mediation between Quinn's parents and grandmother continues, but time is running out as Quinn's condition gets so bad that the time for discussion is over. Dr. Andrews informs them that she needs emergency surgery. The parents decide to only remove the one testicle, just in case. Sean takes the time to really try to understand Quinn. He asks questions about when she began to feel like a girl. The surgery gets underway, and it goes well, but Quinn begins to rapidly decline. Dr. Kalu discovers that internal bleeding is the likely cause. Sean supports him, and Dr. Andrews has to cut her open again. Dr. Kalu was spot on with this. After Howard's surgery, Dr. Melendez is impressed with Claire, who intends to write about the procedure and submit it for publication. Morgan wants to assist with it. Dr. Melendez, impressed with her paper, suggests Claire should read it too. When Quinn wakes, she learns that her parents did not do what she wanted and only removed the cancerous left testicle instead of both. Andrews tries to take the blame as she is not happy. He says Quinn may never know, that she might want to have a child one day. Quinn says she'll be back when she's 18 to remove the other. With both sets of patients treated and in good hands, satisfactory patient scores arrive, and Dr. Lim congratulates Morgan and Claire. Dr. Lim hands Dr. Melendez the wager she promised him. He plans on framing it. Sean and Dr. Kalu agree that they also make a great team. As Quinn is more of a purple girl, Sean stops Ruth from going into her room with pink flowers. Dr. Melendez asks Claire if she read Morgan's paper and tells her he wants her to read it to know what she's up against. He wants her to rise up. Outside, Dr. Glassman tries to talk with Sean, who begins to walk away, even after he offers to drive him home. Sean does so since Dr. Glassman said he couldn't be his friend. At his apartment, Sean knocks on Kenny's door, asking for his help. Kenny opens the door to the pool, and Sean just floats. He wants to understand the feelings Quinn talks about. That was all from the video. I hope you liked it. Subscribe for more content like this and hit the like button to help us out. Also, leave a comment if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Until next time, take care.